As much as I'd love to talk to you about Tesla's Battery Day, which you should all go and watch, I'm going to be talking to you about RIST, a video transport protocol for content that matters. Okay, that's not moved. Okay, quick introduction. Who we are, what do we do? This slide is generally my slide for Americans. But anyway, we're a company who specialize in software-based encoders and decoders for sport, news, and channel contribution. So that's business to business. And we're based in central London. This is the bit where I usually show people from the UK and generally Americans, I can see Big Ben from my desk. And if it wasn't dark, I probably could. What's notable is we build everything in-house. And I've talked quite a bit about this at other London Video Tech events before, hardware, firmware, software, you name it. One thing to sort of bear in mind is we're not to be confused with the quote-unquote other OBS. So what kind of high-level problem are we trying to solve? Transporting B2B video has traditionally been very expensive, and because of COVID, what was once B2B has now become B2C as people are now working from home, and traditional methods of doing that are not available everywhere. The solution to that in the past has been use satellite. This is also expensive. And from an industry point of view, we want to start making use of the benefits of cloud and high-speed internet access that's available. Traditionally, the way things are done in broadcast is fixed on-prem setups, and that means you've got to provision for the peak of what's possible. But this is different now. With the cloud, you can spin up and spin down resources as you need to, and that allows for a lot more flexibility. And this is a sort of comment to be made with the changing face of the industry. This is basically accountants wanting to reduce costs. There's a lot more use of off-the-shelf and lower cost transport and equipment. I should probably mention, since there is an international audience, for those of you on the right, that building there, oddly shaped building, is BT Tower. This is where quite a lot of high-end video is switched in the UK. There's similar things in most countries. The kind of big goal is to try and avoid things like BT Tower. It's very expensive to deliver there. And there's a big push for more content, things like remote production, I'll talk about that later, additional feeds for OTT, for web, etc. What are the engineering problems around it? Well, put simply, the internet is a very mean and nasty place. It will lose your packets and it will add a lot of network jitter. That's a latest Rocky film, Rocky's speech. Also highly recommend you viewing that speech right now. It's a very motivational speech. We don't really want to use sort of consumer-based protocols, which are kind of built around TCP generally changing, which is interesting. They have sort of undefined latency. This could be highly dependent on the chain. Drops in throughput with some implementations if there's packet loss. We also want to take advantage of more than one internet connection these days, and this could often be something like cellular and a fixed line. And this is what's known as hitless switching, or 2022-7. We also want encryption. We don't want people sniffing our streams. We also want authentication. Those are slightly different things, similar but slightly different in the sense that I want to be sure that it's the person on the other end who can send to me. What is this? Yes. Remote at-home production. This has been a big topic for the last couple of years in broadcasting. Unsurprisingly, an even bigger hot topic right now because this essentially is mandatory in many cases with social distancing. One of the big technical challenges, which I could present about for a whole hour, is how to guarantee sync across streams. You could have 10, 15, 20 camera feeds, sometimes from a stadium. You need to have them synchronized end to end. And the key thing for that is to have some form of constant latency throughout. And that's quite challenging if you try to do this with RTMP, with Dash, or anything TCP based. How these problems have been solved in the past, this isn't new. There's plenty of proprietary solutions out there, quite widely deployed. Some of them also have some quite interesting innovation that's kind of unseen outside of this particular niche. But they're all kind of based around the same two ideas, forward error correction and ARQ retransmissions. And since ARQ retransmissions is kind of the big one, I'll kind of go into more detail around that a bit later. So there was a big push from the industry, in particular from ESPN in the US, to say, can we have a vendor neutral video transport protocol, a common mechanism? Because essentially they had to buy one or more of everything. And this is still very common. You go to racks and you see one of every box or one of every VM running each proprietary solution. And in the end, a number of vendors work together to create a solution called RIST, Reliable Internet Stream Transport. And this is based on existing IT technologies. And I'll kind of go into a bit more detail about that later. Just to kind of give you the kind of higher sort of operational overview, the RIST activity group is part of the Video Services Forum. This is a group of users and manufacturers. They produce what is the RIST specification. Though in practice, it's more like a set of guidelines that says use these things from organizations such as the IETF. And then the RIST Forum, which I'm a director of, is one of the marketing associations, or more like member associations, for promoting this technology. And here are the members. There's some interesting names in there. I might touch on some of them more in the future, but a wide range of users, manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, end users, systems integrators, you name it. Most of RIST is essentially based off IETF standards, in particular RTP and RTCP, which have very wide use from the video conferencing industry. I believe most of you are likely watching this using RTP or RTCP right now. Zoom implements some variant of that. And then adding some various other standards or proposed internet standards to do things like encryption. The SMPTE ones are also mentioned, although the SMPTE ones don't really tell you very much. They're essentially how do you map a transport stream into a UDP style video stream. And I would add this, RIST at the moment is centered around transport streams, yet it is possible to transport other types of content. So there are two main profiles. Main profiles are actually not the right word. There are two profiles of RIST out there at the moment. As a simple profile that was created in 2018. This is basically standard RTP. Well, it's backwards compatible with legacy devices. The most important thing from a sort of high-end content transport point of view is it supports bonding or aggregation of links. So two different types of method for using multiple internet connections. There's one called bonding, where you add them up essentially, and you get the sort of combined throughput of all of them. Or there's hitless switching, where you send the same stream on both, and if one of them has an issue, one of the ISPs has an issue, it's recovered from the other one. And then this year, main profile was standardized. So this allows for tunneling. So it reduced the need for multiple ports. So you could tunnel a ton of traffic backwards and forwards on the same port. And this could include control traffic, such as if you had a PTZ camera, you want to tilt it. Control, if you want to do SSH, etc. Encryption, using something known as a pre-shared key, loosely a password, more of a key, or DTLS, which is more like what your bank uses. Authentication, equally certificate-based. Some high-end organizations mandate certificates for particularly high-value content, content such as post-production of film that isn't finished yet. There's mandatory requirements for things like DTLS, or just plain passwords. And also, since a lot of this is transport stream based, it also has null packet removal. So it allows you to signal a mechanism to say, oh, let's not send this packets full of zeros that are in a transport stream to keep it flat. Let's signal it, send lower bitrate packets, and then recover them on the end. Not recover them, but regenerate them on the other end. So I've talked quite a bit about the paperwork side of things, but how do you actually do this? There's a ton of open source around it. GStreamer has support, UPipe has support. LibRIST is, I would say, broadly speaking, the gold standard at the moment. This is basically a library you can plug, play, and go. And there's ongoing integration work with LibRIST into FFmpeg and VLC. There's also RIST plugins available for Wireshark. One of the things we do get from the field is it's very relatively straightforward to debug issues of RIST, since RTP, RTCP is already widely available. And since I've talked about that, I might as well explain what these are. What are retransmissions? Known as all sorts of different names. So there's retransmissions, retransmits. ARQ stands for automatic repeat request. But it's all kind of the same thing. And this is where a receiver detects that it's lost a packet. So there's a counter at the beginning of the packet, and it says, oh, I've lost X number. And it requests the sender to retransmit them. So the sender has a buffer, and the sender goes and finds that missing packet and sends it again. Usually on a different port, or it has a flag to say, hey, this is a retransmitted packet. This is obviously affected by the round trip latency. So going London to Sydney will take some time. So there are trade-offs to this approach, and this is what's known as a negative acknowledgement. The interesting thing about RIST is it allows end users to have quite a wide range of strategies to deliver this. I believe quite similar to Quick as HTTP3 and Quick, where you can do all sorts of things for retransmission strategies. So it allows for quite a bit of innovation on approach. You're not sort of locked into a single method of doing things. There's all sorts of strategies about not flooding the link with retransmissions, pacing the retransmissions carefully, not bursting, all world of things that could be done depending on the quality of your link. And this is more of an art than a science. Let's look at some real world data. A stream from London to New York. This was using 2 ISPs over 10 months, I think. And you can see each ISP actually had its own outages at any given point for sometimes small or sometimes long period of time. But you can see that all the packets are recovered, and I can't count how many zeros, how many, is that 911 million or is it 9 billion? I can't easily count. But 911 million received packets and about 1.3, well, nearly 1.4 million that were recovered. Again, all sorts of strategies that you can go through to try and do error recovery over multiple links. You can figure out, you can do metrics to figure out how each one is coping, bias traffic on another one. In this case, we just sent them kind of naively, fully lit on both links, and then send the retransmissions on both links, which is the kind of semi-optimal strategy according to some. But it again depends on the latency that you want. In terms of RIST deployments, we have quite a bit deployed now, again, around professional video applications. COVID is changing this. We're starting to do more and more video to the home. We certainly did it for our entire team, giving them RIST-capable decoders so they could access video low latency from the office. The cloud is really important. It allows you to distribute video cost effectively. Again, spin up, spin down. You can do something like transport a football match for a couple of hours and it will cost you dollars. And most importantly, at IBC last year, which now seems like a long time, well, it does seem like a long time ago, but it doesn't seem like a long time ago, AWS Media Connect added support for RIST. And so you can now send streams into RIST and use the Media Connect platform and also Media Live platform to transport and transcode and process all sorts of live video. There's a big elephant in the room. It's called SRT, Secure Reliable Transport, kind of a competitor. This was built by Haivision for their products, and it was open sourced in 2017, based on UDT, which is a file transfer protocol. The lib, to their credit, has been very easy for people to implement, and so you see a lot of devices that have it. It's done quite a few things for industry education. It's paved the way for an understanding that, hey, I'm connecting B2B facilities together. That could be broadcast facilities, that could be broadcast to CDN. This is different to the protocol stack that we need for B2C. But I would kind of caveat it's, by their own admission, quite a complex protocol and quite a complex code base. The protocol they've given is 80 pages long. The code base is pretty complex. The next set of slides, I'll kind of use these sort of, I won't try and go and ad lib it and go off piece. I'll use the kind of official RIST forum comparisons, which I think are not controversial, but yeah, there could be drama if you want drama. RIST, designed jointly by industry experts, SRT, single company implementation. RIST base stream is RTP, compatible with existing devices. So you could, for example, send to certain devices on a network where there isn't as much loss using legacy RTP, but if you have other devices on a network, say further away, where there's or going over links with much higher loss, you could use RIST. RIST is also NAC only based. SLT is based on UDT, which has both AX and NACs. I think the key thing I find is multipathing in RIST. Again, bonding, combining multiple paths for high bandwidth, or seamless switching, so replicating streams over multiple paths. SLT at this point doesn't have multipath. I believe they're adding this in 1.5 at some point in the near future. Also kind of comparison tables, quite similar in many respects. They do support firewall traversal, high bandwidth support, FEC, no null packet compression, but null packets is kind of niche. The key encryption bits are different. So RIST does support DTLS, RIST SLT is PSK only. As I also mentioned, lack of Bonding again. Authentication is pre-shared, whereas RIST supports certificates with TLS SRP, which is a standard protocol for certificate exchange. SRT by their own admission stops being effective at around 12 to 15% packet loss. RIST can achieve 25, 100% overhead, 30 to 40% at 200% overhead, and there are studies and real-world data of people achieving more than that. So I think to conclude, it is now possible to implement a vendor-neutral transport protocol as easily as do it yourself. Certainly simple profile in particular. You could knock this up quite easily in a day or two. Or if you want to do something more complex, use LibRIST. And this lets you do highly reliable video transport using one or more ISPs. Quite notable in the UK, ISPs are now offering reduced costs on second lines in people's homes just because their main lines are overloaded with YouTube and Netflix, etc. This is definitely going to become more important for socially distanced remote production. So not the kind of, oh, damn, we have to get some mechanism for people to work from home, but actually this is going to be, I'm not going to use the phrase new normal, but this is going to be the way things continue, where there will be temporary sites that may not have full capacity, or people will be sitting at home and running operations and having video at a relatively low latency. So yeah, that's the end. And if you have any questions, please let me know.